Hey everyone. You know what? I've been really hearing an awful lot about people, about following your own path, doing your own thing. Where how we're trained at a young age to perform certain things and to do certain tasks and to follow a certain path in our life. And by the way, welcome to the channel. My name is Judd, and I'm hearing a lot of this from other creators, and I want to take more of a Christian perspective of this. And what I want to say to you right now is the fact that I firmly believe that God puts us into situations for a reason. Okay? It might be just because we will perform a whole lot better under certain situations, in certain conditions. With that being said, I'm trying to stick with just scriptures on this. I'm not going to throw a whole lot of Bible, but I'm really trying to keep a biblical thought. And now I'm going to say I firmly believe God does not want us to be in poverty. Okay? And there is that philosophy out there that a real Christian is going to be poor. A real Christian is going to be they're not going to be seeking out wealth and luxury in their lives. And to seek it out, yes, that is bad. To be independent, to work on, not being broke, to not be in debt, to not be desiring about what the world has, that is a completely different situation. And I take a look at my own self, my own finances, my own beliefs in things, and what I believe is to chase after prosperity, to chase after wealth, will put a separation between me and God. Okay? Man, we are very unique in this aspect that when it comes to families, when it comes to to our wives, to our children, we firmly believe we have to step it up. We have to be the provider, and that is true. That is our job. Okay, that is what God expects out of us. But on the same note, how often do we take the time to actually to think that we need to just be focused on being pleasing to God and not be chasing after the whims of this world. And it is in today's age, it is very hard. I think a lot of people, especially men, we have a tendency to focus on if we're not meeting a certain standard that society has put before us, then we are a failure. And that's not necessarily true. I'm the type of guy, I'd be perfectly content not living in a big house. I'd be perfectly content not owning my own property. If I could get away with it right now, I'd probably be living in a van. I don't have a problem with that. I've known people who would, for economic reasons, they actually, I gotta here in front of my glasses, I'm trying to pick out, sorry, that they, what they did was, for economic reasons, they chose for, whether it be a year or maybe a year and a half or 2 years, in order to set up their finances properly, they chose to go a direction. That direction was to just live out of their car. They had they had a cooking system set up for themselves, a way they would obviously a lot of prepackaged food is what they had to eat, and I don't really care for that, but that's what they would do. They would find a 24-hour gas station somewhere, parked nearby. That way, if they had to go in and use the bathroom, they could. They would have themselves gym memberships to where they could go in and take a shower every day, get their exercise, do whatever they need to do. And they would do this for about 6 months to a year, oftentimes just to get rid of that debt. And it's really financially sound if you think about it. You might only have the car payment, you don't have rent to worry about, you don't have utilities to worry about, and it's what they would do. Okay, and that was a whole big thing I would see on YouTube quite a bit, was these people going out and living a van life, living out of their cars, living out of trucks, however it was, and they were very content with it. And of course, in their mind, in their world, what they were doing a lot of traveling. They were moving from point to point an awful lot. And I completely understand it. I see what they were doing. I understand what they were doing. They were blessed with that ability. But right now I still have one child living with me. Yes, he's an adult, but he's still staying with me. I'm wanting to wait for him to get onto his feet before I venture out to do something like that. But the fact of the matter is, I'm very content with my job. I really don't have the aspirations of becoming a millionaire YouTuber or a millionaire, just doing my own little thing on the side, and becoming incredibly wealthy. Actually, my biggest goals right now are just not to have debt. Debt is a slave. If you ever think about it, if you're putting in a lot of if you're working a lot, who are you working a lot for? It's not for yourself. You're working for, to pay off debt. All right. You're working for the utility company. You're working for the landlord. If you have car payments, guess what? You're now paying for, you were indebted to the bank to pay off your car. If you have a mortgage, you're indebted to the mortgage company to pay off your mortgage. Okay? Back in the days of old, oftentimes people would work, it'd be like company-owned housing, company-owned, stores where they would go to. And if they wanted a place to live, well, guess what? You had to go to work. That's what you were doing. Oftentimes I believe they would just automatically take the rent right out of the paycheck. In times before that, what people were doing was, you lived under, over in Europe, I'm going to say, like Renaissance Europe, medieval Europe, you still had your lords that you were living under, and the vast tracts of land. But people, the peasants who lived in those villages under his land, oftentimes what they were doing was, they were responsible for the farming, for tilling the land, for raising up the crops, for the planting of the crops, and in turn they had places to live. They had food. And I really don't know the whole political ins and outs of all this, but that is what people were doing. That's what they were, that was how they lived. Now there's a difference between just surviving and living, okay? But if you wanted to have, eat and have clothing and then shelter, well, that's how you lived. That's what you had to do. Okay, and I can understand it in today's world. We're seeing all these people, especially on social media, they're just doing these incredible things. They're getting to go on these incredible trips, and we think to ourselves, well, why can't we do that? Why am I stuck in this dead-end job and I'm not doing this? Well, I want to talk to you, and I'm already 8 minutes in. I'm running out of time, but I want to really talk to you about is just being content in what you're doing. Okay? If you are, a factory worker, that's what I'm pretty much a factory worker. That's, blue collar labor, factory worker. That's what I've done for most of my life. I've done truck driving. I've worked in a children's home, and I said before, I have no idea how that happened, but I did. I worked part-time in a children's home. I worked for several different factories. I've had lots of different jobs. I've done pizza delivery, side gig work, doing delivering groceries, doing like DoorDash, stuff like that. I've done this quite a bit over the years. And in all honesty, at the end of the day, do I want more? Yes, I would love to, travel to another country. I'm really hoping to do that by next year, to go and visit my lady friend in the Philippines. And we were supposed to do it this year, but unfortunately, due to some issues with my car, that took up a lot of money, and also with medical issues that I've had recently, I couldn't do that. So that trip is being postponed for about another year while I'm recovering financially. Thus, me saying I'm kind of enslaved to the debts, and until they're paid off, I really can't do anything. But we cannot be so focused on being I'm really trying to pick my words out here for you to understand that I want to see people be more content in their living situation and quit looking at what the proverbial Joneses are doing. Okay? And the proverbial Joneses, like I said, we're seeing them online, and they're doing these incredible things, but chances are they're incredibly broke. And it's making all of us want to be broke with them. Okay? So with that being said, I am more concerned about being content in what I'm doing. I got a car right now. It's a very nice car. A lot of people are always complimenting me on it, but they don't know that's not the car I wanted. I wanted something that was a little less. Unfortunately, that was the car I got. What I wanted, that to me was less, ended up costing more, and this was the car that I ended up getting into. And at the end of the day, it's probably what I need. I just don't see it yet. But I think we need to, that is what we need to start learning, is to be more content in our lives and being more focused on living. See, here's something a lot of people don't understand, is if you're learn to be content, instead of trying to get loans and having all this credit card debt to get what the proverbial Joneses have, to do what the proverbial Joneses are doing. If you don't have that debt to begin with, you are free. If something happens to, if I get to where something happens to my job and I am forced to relocate for work in order to do something, and I'm forced into it, what I can do, since I don't have debt, I don't have to worry about losing my car. Okay? Hopefully by that point, if that ever happened, I would have a bit of a savings set up so that I can go, I'll be in a position where I could relocate and reestablish myself. You know what? Perhaps I'll be in a different position to actually do more of what God wants me to do. Okay? I know some of you guys are probably watching this, well, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in that. That's fine. I want to encourage you, because despite being trapped in that cycle, getting up, going to work, having a job that you probably don't really like for whatever reason, you're thinking that you're just a walking zombie. The moment you realize you're content, the moment you think about contentment and being content in what you're doing, you start becoming more free. See, freedom and slavery are up here. Okay? When you're in Christ Jesus and in Him alone, that is freeing. Okay? I don't need to worry about having a huge house. I don't need to worry about having huge tracts of land. Will it be nice? Yes, it'd be wonderful. It'd be wonderful to have a huge tract of land that is mine. I can go out there, I can camp, I can do whatever I want within reason. That'd be wonderful. It'd be wonderful to be able to just hop in my car, not worry about punching in a time clock, but I can just, like today, I can just hop in my car and I can just take off to wherever I want to go. I could take off, be gone for a week, come back, check on things. Tomorrow, do whatever I want. That'd be fantastic, but you know what? I'd probably get into a whole awful lot of trouble. if I was doing that. And also, people I work with, what kind of a encouragement would I be if I was just up and disappearing? I probably wouldn't be much of an encouragement. So, let's focus on our contentment. Okay, we don't need high-end clothing. Okay, unfortunately, there's guys like me. We are well over 6 foot. We have a long torso. I really, I could probably buy my jeans at Walmart very easily. I'm not going to complain about my jeans. I could buy my jeans at Walmart very easily. Okay, that's not an issue. Socks and underwear, that's not an issue. I do like to buy a bit more of an expensive shoe than what I would get at Walmart, because it's just more of a quality that I look for anymore versus just having a pair of shoes. I want a pair of shoes that's not going to fall apart on me in a couple months. And that is what I've run into with Walmart shoes. So I don't usually focus on getting my shoes at Walmart. I look at something that, at least will last me a couple of years versus a couple months. But my shirts and jackets, on the other hand, are very different. I usually have to pay for shirts that cost quite a bit more, only because they are longer and they go down more. They fit me better. And usually, if you're a tall guy like me, you put something into the wash and you go to dry it, over a few washes, they shrink, and half your it's supposed to be a tall size, but half your torso is showing. So usually my shirts are the biggest thing that I have to worry about, but I'm not even looking for designer shirts, just something fits. And that is very different than wanting the designer life, having this life where I have all this different stuff. I don't care about, I have a TV right now. I probably haven't sat and watched anything on it in a very long time. I almost don't care if I have a TV or not. I'm actually considering just getting rid of it, and because I'm not using it. I'm really not using it. So, try to simplify my life, because I just don't need it. And the less stuff I have, the less likely I'm going to feel trapped. I just don't, because my stuff is not defining me. What I own is not defining me. And that's really how it should be. When you're not content, you're trapped. Okay? When you're seeing what everybody else has and you think you deserve it and you go out to get it, you're going into a trap. Okay? Just recently I have actually been able to pay off all my credit cards. I still have some on a firm account that I got to get paid off. And all the extra money that I got is going to be going right into my card, getting that thing paid off. I'm hoping by this time next year I'll be almost nearly completely out of debt. That is my focus. That's really what I'm focusing on. That's what I'm desiring. And I think that'll be completely wonderful. But you know what? I really don't want to accumulate any more debt. I don't have that desire. I don't have desire for all the stuff anymore. Maybe someday I'll buy a house. It doesn't have to be a perfect house. Something small, something that I can, maybe something that the whole room is mostly a studio with, a bed off to the side and, kitchen, and the only real room I got is maybe a bathroom. That's really all I need. Okay? But I want us to think about is, if you got food in your belly, you're blessed. If you got a roof over your head, a place to sleep, you're blessed. If you got clothes on your back, you're blessed. Okay? Shoes on your feet, you're blessed. Okay? You don't have to have everything that is perfect. Okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. That's all we require. That's all we need. Quit worrying about what the billionaires have. Quit worrying about what these influencers are putting out there. You don't need it. So, with that being said, I want to share this with you. It's out of the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 6, starting with verse 6. But godliness with contentment is a great gain. For we bought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of this world. But if we have food and clothing with ease, we will be content. See, that's all you need, man. That's all we need. You know, there's a lot that I hear a lot of these other content creators talking about. Okay? They're calling themselves red-pilled. I think maybe they're red-pilled to what the devil is doing, but they don't realize it's the devil. Okay? I'm all for, I'm a firm believer, if, a woman does the same work as a man, and she should have the same pay. I'm completely all for that. Women should have the same, basically, whatever a man can do, the women should have the same rights. Okay? If a woman has something to offer to whatever, to society or whatever the situation is, we should give her, we should give that woman a listen to, give her an ear, see what it is she has to say. And that's a big deal. I just realized I've had my heater going, and I do apologize for that. I'm sure it's kind of interfering with the audio, but let's listen up. Let's focus on being content in our lives, okay? Let's focus on not worrying about what everybody else has, okay? If you're worried, don't worry about losing your job. Okay, if you're right in Christ and you're focusing on being right with Christ, if you lose your job, chances are you'll find another one, probably a better one. Okay, put God first. Put being godly first. Put serving Christ first. And with that, I'm praying for you. God bless. See you in the next one.